Ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to a longtime colleague, friend, fellow tap dancer, a woman with so many multiple degrees in education, a degree, a master's, and is it a PhD as well?
I'm working on it.
No, a PhD is coming. That makes me wonder really why she's even agreed to talk to me in the first place. But not only that, actually, Annette, you have a very high level of common sense, and I find a lot of people with an array of so many educational skills to also be aligned with common sense. It's very rare to find people with both those attributes. You're sort of educated, but also very cool. Not only are you book smart, but also street smart. Ladies and gentlemen, an aerialist, pianist, tap dancer, instructor of tap, Annette Walker. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much, Syrian. I want to take you with me wherever I go so that you can introduce me.
That'll be good. That'll be a gig for me, right?
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you.
Can I start by saying one or two things? What I love personally most about your dancing is the sense of buoyancy you bring to the stage, and you really are sort of unsinkable as a person as long as I've known you. You're somebody who has a deep sense of swing. You're able to sort of sit in the pocket for extended periods of time. There's a lot of syncopation in your footwork. You have educated feet. You understand the history of tap, but there's also an openness about you. You're always ready to get creative. You always have something positive to say, and I think the world needs more artists and more people like you. Let me just start by saying that.
Oh, I don't think I've got anything to add. I'm just going to sit here and take the compliments.
But I want to start by asking you. I want to take it back to the beginning of your journey in tap. What was it in your life that first lit the fuse?
Oh, I have kind of vague memories of watching musical films as a child, on the television back in the days when they only had four stations. Does that
Wait,
give away my age?
me
um,
too.
and I'd started going to dance classes. I started going to ballet when I was 4, and I was allowed to start modern when I was 7. And in between all the classes, I'd see the tap, and I'd be like, I want to do that. When can I tap? And I wasn't allowed to start tap until I was 8. So I had this kind of had to have this patience. And when you're a child, a few months is a very long time. But I just remember thinking, okay, I'll do modern and I'll do ballet because I get to tap dance. So at the local dance school, they taught the ISDD syllabus of tap, and that's how I got started. Going once a week, I think a 45-minute class, and I stuck with that until I was about 19. So I went through all the so-called grades, various changes and things that happened along the way. But out of everything, all the dancing and all the other stuff that I did, tap was my first love.
I see. So how did you find, because we can go back and forth about the grading system and what's kind of missing there. Did you ever think you would be able to improve upon that grading?
I remember, I don't remember what age I was, but I remember at one point watching one film, and I used to have this thing where I didn't know the names of films. I didn't really know the names of actors or dancers, because you just turn it on and it would be there, and it would be somewhere midway through the film. You'd have no idea who these people are. But I got to like recognize, obviously I recognized like Shirley Temple. And I was, oh, I don't know, I couldn't tell you anything about the films. I'd just sit and wait for the dance numbers. There'd be like the Fred Astaire movies, the Gene Kelly movies, but this one was a Shirley Temple movie. And I don't know what kind of possessed me to attempt to copy the steps. So obviously it was Bojangles. I didn't know he was Bojangles at the time, but it was like Uncle Bo going up the steps with Shirley Temple. And I was like, well, she's a wee little thing. I should be able to do this. And I was at home. The television was on in the living room, and I ran out to the hallway, to the carpeted stairs, to try and copy the steps going up the stairs. And I just remember having that moment of looking at the television and thinking to my tap classes, thinking there's something missing here. There's this wide gap, and I couldn't figure out. Obviously, as a child, I didn't know what it was, but every time I was looking at what we got to see in the musical films and what I was doing in the studio, there was always something in the back of my mind. It's like, there is something missing. What is it? so I get frustrated at times for all sorts of reasons. The first and major element was I didn't understand how tap could be taught without rhythm first. It bugged me for my entire childhood, and I had my way around it was to memorize the rhythm, as the teacher would be showcasing. We are going to do this exercise, or we are going to do this new piece of choreography. I would, memorize the rhythms, because then they would break down the steps without the rhythm. And I was like, what is that? Because it made no sense to me. It was like, as a child, I struggled to put the two together. I couldn't understand the steps. They would give the names of the steps. They would say, these are the steps, but I couldn't understand. And then start counting. But I was like, but why don't you just do that with the step? So yeah, that was my struggle. But then I realized I was also gifted, because I had the ability to do that. I had the ability to memorize it. I had the ability to kind of figure out a way that I could learn it. And it meant that I was able to kind of progress through, because I found a way that worked for me. It was just frustrating, because I was like, what on earth is this? Steps without rhythm? Nah. So fast forward, the first time I saw, what was called rhythm tap, and I saw steps, rhythm, and someone breaking down into small chunks of rhythm with the steps. I was like, that's it. That's what I've been missing. And it all fell into place at that particular moment. I was at Pineapple. I was looking through the little window at Junior Lanyon's class, and he was doing a call and response. And I was like, why have I never done that before? So by then I was an adult.
It's good, it's sometimes I think, I don't know how you feel about it. Sometimes when you go through the process of, not finding it, that helps you find it. You know that like you said, you saw it and you just knew straight away off the bat, that's what I want to be doing. And sometimes the process of actually going through a few things that aren't right and trying stuff out and going, maybe not, helps you kind of like know when you found it, right? When you found what you're looking for. And and certainly a lot of people came up through
it was a funny thing that throughout my entire kind of childhood dancing, all the teachers would be like, you've got a really good sense of rhythm. They would be telling, my mum this. They'd get really excited in the class. But
Sorry to cut you off. I just want to know where does that come from? Is your family musical?
This is something that I've started thinking about in the last few years, because I realized that the foundation of the understanding of rhythm was outside of the dance studio. It was I also learned piano and violin, and as yeah.
Making everybody look bad, right?
Well,
I feel like such a one-trick pony when I chat to you.
it turns out that, and again, I had this conversation with my mum just a few years ago. Turns out that I was a bit of a protege child. I was that child that you could show me something once, and I could figure out what it was, once or twice, and that would be that's how I ended up, I think, getting piano lessons. My mum's cousin showed me something on the piano. I played it back, and she's like, "Oh, she needs to have piano lessons," and she literally bugged my mum until I had piano lessons. So I started when I was 7. So the ability to mimic and understand has always been there. It wasn't something that I had, to work on separately. What I did also kind of appreciate is that I had a kind of good sense of coordination. Again, that was I think a gift, and the main elements was being able to exploit that from such a young age. So having the opportunity to work on it or to find other ways of growing those skills. When it came to rhythm and music, I come from a Caribbean background. My family are Jamaican, and it's there from before you're out of the womb.
It's there before you're even conceived. The rhythm is there. All right. So your family are they're musical, but so you were all, not only was it you were kind of growing up with this gift, this mindset, but also your family, do they also like play music, or
It's a cultural. I think it's a cultural element. So my mum. The reason I started ballet lessons is because my mum never had the opportunity to go to dance lessons when she was a child, but she
living vicariously through you, living by dance, mum, stop it.
It was great because she enrolled me into ballet classes, and she enrolled herself into modern classes
Wow,
at
cool.
the same time. So
You're also a creative person, really.
yes, and I think that I come from quite a creative family. I later learned my grandmother absolutely loved dancing as well, and she was quite a social dancer. And I think that's even how she met my grandfather. I think it was like a dance. And she continued traveling and going on holidays around the world and going to all these like dinner dances and tea dances and winning competitions.
People don't meet that way anymore, I think
No,
That's
no.
a thing of the
And
past, is
again,
that we met at the tea dances or whatever in England.
it's a funny thing because my grandmother was a party girl, and so,
okay. All right.
she loved going out dancing. Her 70th birthday was a huge party in a club with the DJ and all dressing up and food and drink, and yeah, we had a massive fat party for the family, and she outdanced every one of us. That was so that they're kind of, if you think about like the base of like where you're coming from and what you're kind of like born into, there's music, there's dance, there's socializing, there's a strong sense of music. My dad was always playing lovers rock and reggae. I always remember the car journeys. He'd sing along. I learned songs purely from my dad singing. Sometimes the music wouldn't even be on, and he'd be singing, and I realized I'd learnt songs from my dad singing. And that sense of he was always kind of making it his own. That sense of that kind of owning a song. He'd change the words, he would play with the rhythms, he would change the kind of melody and the harmonies. We used to have these fun car journeys, just sing-alongs. And I had to really think about how all these different elements kind of overlap, because we often focus on what we do in the studio, but actually it was a lot to do culturally, what was happening socially in the spaces outside of the studio, because it's like everyday life.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You know, like Victor Wooten, a bass player, speaks about how basically, just to your point, basically if you sit and play bass in your bedroom, chances are you're probably not gonna have something to say. And actually going out into the world and living life and gaining experiences, including your upbringing, including, you know, all these elements that make up who you are, actually massively influences what you bring to the floor, you know, like more so than we even care to admit. And I think like as you get a bit older, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about myself. Digging deeper. I think I try to align myself with where I would naturally sit, you know, and where my natural sense of musicality comes from, which is of course my family and my upbringing as well. And it sounds to me like, you know, your family were not afraid to express themselves, you know, in multiple directions, you know, and so that's like, I wonder if they can. I don't know anything about this, but I wonder if they can isolate like an artistic gene or a creative gene. But I think it is extremely rare, as far as I know, to be a creative person. Extremely rare. For that to, rather than just somebody who works in the creative field, if you know what I mean. But you always came across as somebody who was very creative, and what I love about it is that it's not just limited to tap; it goes in all different directions, and I think that's really something unusual and individual. So there was a turning point for you, which just to kind of go back to where we were saying, you saw juniors class. A lot of people came up through juniors open classes, right, including myself. You saw juniors class. At what point did you go, I think I can do this?
Okay, so there were a couple of stages. Before I went to juniors class, I'd actually had a bit of a hiatus from tap dancing. So I went to university, nothing at all related to anything artistic, dance or music. And I was the first time that I wasn't regularly doing music and dance classes, and I missed it. So I was just like, where's the dance class? And out of all the dance classes and all the music classes, I was like, where's the tap class? So I realised I had a bit of an obsession with tap.
Yep. It's a problem, you know, it's a syndrome of sorts, isn't it?
But I had, you know, I was quite isolated from the dance world, and had graduated, had got a relatively good job, was working full time, and my first thought was, where can I go to tap? And I started, you know, looking. This is before things were really available to find online. So I would do these recce's. I'd be like, oh, I've heard of this Pineapple Dance Studios place. Oh, what is this Dance Works place? And I would go and visit them, pick up the brochure, you know, have a walk around, because you were allowed, you know, to poke your head into the classes and or look through and I did all of that because I was just hungry to get back into dance. And the first tap class that I went to after about maybe 3 or 4 years of no tap was Tobias Tack. Tobias Tack's class, he ran open classes at Danceworks.
Oh, people don't understand how talented that guy was.
And this is what happened was that, and I wish I had a copy of the flyer that got me so excited, because he had labeled it American Rhythm Tap. And he had this little paragraph, and he was talking about all these people I had never heard of. Now I know who they are. But you know, he referenced like Buster Brown and like Jimmy Slide, and he was talking about the history and the roots, and I had never seen anyone or heard anyone talk about that. So I was like, what is this? And I was straight down his Saturday lunchtime class. And I spoke with him afterwards, because I was like, oh my gosh, it's like just what I've been looking for. But I think I'm not sure exactly what happened with the timetabling of that particular class. I think I was between jobs, or I was still sorting out, I think, my kind of full-time job scheduling. I was changing jobs or something, and I didn't go. I wasn't able to go to the classes regularly, so it was probably about almost a year later before I then revisited the dance studios. I think it was possibly to do with the travel and the journey of where it was coming from. I think I was probably living at home, or maybe I'd moved. I can't remember. Anyway, Pineapple turned out to be more convenient. And Saturdays obviously were my day off. And I started going to Derek Hartley's classes because I had felt that I'd been out of tap practice for a while, and he had like a kind of elementary level class called Jazz Tap. And I thought, you know what, this will get my feet going again. It was like, this is a good way to get my feet going again. I actually made a really good friend in that class, but it was whilst I was kind of going to Pineapple for that class that I stuck around and had a look in Junior's class, because I thought, this looks like the class that I'm working up to do, but I didn't think I could just walk in and do it.
Yeah.
So it was a case of, let me get my feet going. Let me see if I can still tap dance. Can I still do a shuffle and a hop step? So I
got to dust it off a bit, haven't you? It gets rusty. You got to let me just dust it off for a couple of weeks and see how I feel.
A little bit rusty. And when I poked my head into Junior's rhythm tap class, and I was like, that's what I'm aiming for. That's the goal. Especially when I saw, and I can name the people I saw in the class. There was Diane Hampstead, because she also went to Derek Hartley's classes. Yes. There was Cobner Holbrook Smith. He was in there as well. And I think Makiba was in there as well. And I poked my head into and I was just like that. They were doing a call and response. Junior was going to each person and doing a call, and they were doing a response, and he was just going down the line. Like, it's like 3 or 4 of them in the class. And because it was such a small class, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to work up to going into that one. Because there was nowhere to hide.
Exactly. I can't hang out at the back.
It was like, nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
But the actual, the turning point in actually starting the class came from Derek Hartley had these kind of showcase projects that he would do once a year. I think Bloomsbury Theatre.
I was at one of those.
Yeah, and it crossed over. There's so many things that crossed over that particular event, because I signed up to do workshops. They would have guest workshops. I can't remember off the top of my head who I know Andrew Nemar was there for one of them, and I think I met Rogelio Douglas Jr. there as well, and Walter Freeman.
That's the year I was there. I was there, but I was like 18 or something, and I didn't know anything.
Well, this is the thing, because I didn't know anything about the history. This was me going to tap and just, doing steps. I used to watch Diane Hampstead and go, wow.
Oh, we all did. Well, I still do.
So I went. I think even Derek invited myself and another dancer. Her name will come back to me, because we became like tap buddies for 6 months. Oh, Daniela. What's her name? Her name was Daniela. She's an actress.
Yeah, that's
A
right.
blonde actress, but we were like tap buddies, and we both went to Derek Hartley's Bloomsbury Theatre workshop. It was the first time I saw Will Gaines. In fact, I ran into him backstage, and Will was like, "What's this old man doing here?" And then I saw him on stage, and I went, "What?" That was a turning point, because I had never seen that before.
The footage of him in London with Chuck Green and Honey Coles is mind-blowing. I still have that on VHS. Because I don't know if you can probably find it on like Vimeo or some kind of streaming service nowadays, but it's been up and down from YouTube due to like copyright and stuff. But I've still got it like under my parents' house under the bed, I've got a collection of old VHS stuff, and one of them is that appearance of Will Gaines.
I mean, it was crazy when I think, because obviously I had no idea who he was, but when I had finished, I think I was in the first half and sat down and watched the second half, and he came out, and I was like, "What is this?" Because I had never seen improvised tap dancing performed before, and I was just absolutely drawn in. Then Junior came out. It was, I think, on the program Junior and Friends. And it was Junior, Cobbs, Makiba, and they did a piece of choreography, and I was like blown away. I was like, "What is this?" Literally, it was that event. It was, what year? I think it might have been 2001, maybe. Sometime, I think it was 2001. Anyway, I was completely excited. I was so excited that after that event, the next Saturday I went to Junior's class. I'd been going to Derek's class from the January, I think it was the beginning, January 2001. And that event was sometime around May or April or May. And I was straight into Junior's, and it was only like three or four people in Junior's class still at that time. But I'd been going to like tap now for nearly 6 months, and I thought, right, I'm going, that's it. And that was the absolute turning point to kind of get me into, I think it just shows also the power of seeing live tap, and actually, because it's only much later on that I've now been able to put together who all those people were. Because obviously, I became friends with Makiba and Cobbs and Junior, and I was, hang out with Will Gaines, and all those people are now a big part of my life. But that was the moment that I met them.
There was a convergence in the early 2000s of tap dancers in London. I felt honoured to be a part of that. And just as you described, I was at one of those Bloomsbury things. I think it was about 2001. I remember Sam Webber, whichever one he was at.
Yes, that's true. Because I think he was 2001 and 2002. I only remember going to two.
Man, my memory's really hazy, but Rogelio and everybody you just mentioned was there.
I think they were the 2002, the second one I went to. I think they were the 2002 kind of crowd. Rusty Frank, I believe, was there as well.
Was she? I don't remember her being there. That's wild. All right. Wow. I mean, we didn't know each other at that point. No. We must have just walked past each other a bunch of times because, I was on stage as a student on stage. But I do remember that those moments, most of us were just in the wing, like watching, trying to see what was going on and what was going down. Do you know what I mean? And that's the time I met Walter and Rogelio, and they started telling me about Savion, and I was like, "What? Who's that?" Because that seems to be, everybody knows now. We didn't have the internet. The internet wasn't around. We had to talk to each other. we had to go. There's this guy Savion. You need to look at him. It's next level, and it's music, and it's this, that, and the other, and it's just about getting someone to nod their head to the beat. And the excitement of just hearing it, and there was something about not being able to quite grasp what it was that made it like this sort of secret, almost like a secret society or something, And that's what I felt. I really appreciated Derek for putting that stuff together, because actually it just brought so many people from around the world that
it's really, really important. There's so many important moments that have kind of given us an opportunity to see tap live and to socialize with other tap dancers, and it's what got me, because at that moment, I think after the first one, I was going to both Derek's classes and Junior's classes. And so my Saturdays were just tap. And I did start, I never at that moment I still continued experimenting with going to other dance clubs, because I love dancing. And I took up Jimmy's locking and popping classes.
Yeah, Jimmy Williams, baby.
I would go sometimes I'd go midweek in the evening and I'd go to like a jazz class, or
Mm.
I was dancing at one point several times a week, and I was working full time.
Now, I can't help but notice there is also a bass guitar in the background. Is it a bass? I can't quite, or is it a guitar? No, it's a bass.
guitar.
It's a bass. So, what was just like? Was there like you don't play enough already, or you're just going to add one more thing to the? So
So I've got into this really, I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad habit of picking things up. I was trying to explain to someone the other day, and they just started laughing at me because I said, "Oh, I went and did a music course, and I had the opportunity to play the drums, and I just kind of picked it up." They're like, "No one picks up the drums." They're like, "That's not normal."
let me guess, she can do it.
It was a comedy moment because we had I hadn't had one drum lesson. A teacher was basically showing us some basics on the kit, and we had a guest come in to go through some, proper drumming technique. And I don't know how I ended up the guinea pig. This happens a lot, but I ended up the guinea pig. I'm the worst guinea pig because when someone shows me something and I just do it, they're like, "You've done this before."
To fail.
Fail.
I'm trying to make a point as a teacher, and you've just walked all over that by doing it correctly. Don't, ladies and gentlemen, stop teaching Annette. She does too many things. She's going to make us all look bad.
But this is the bass guitar came about. I had signed up to do a Latin jazz course at Goldsmiths with John Crawford, and we had been he'd been working on some real fundamentals of Afro-Cuban and bossa nova. My main instrument was the piano, and what happened is that we had this assignment, and I created a Afro-Cuban piece that was going to be taught to the class for them to, play all the different parts. So I had the bass part, and there was, the montuno and the cascara and the bell, all of that I had kind of like put together. And I was in a tutorial with John, and I said I'd worked out all the parts on the piano. But I have, I have again this habit of working kind of things out that are usually people play independently, and then sticking them together just for fun.
16 solos at the same time, go.
It was something I started as a child, where you'd have, those two hand pieces. Someone would play on the lower part of the piano, someone else would play on the upper part of the piano, and I'd be like at home on my own with no one to play the other part with, and so I'd work the whole thing out on my own. I would create a version that I could do the two hands on the bottom part and the two hands on the top part, and I would just put the whole thing I would spend hours working this out. So this is like I don't know, some sort of strange polyrhythm brain that I have that just seems to be obsessed with doing pattern things.
Yeah.
And what happened in this tutorial is that I was, I think, playing the bass line and playing them on tuner or some son clave pattern. And John was like, "Oh, if you can play that on the bass guitar, you probably get a few gigs." And I was like, "Oh, I might try that." And I bought a bass guitar.
You've got the right surname for it because you're walking with the bass. Annette Walker. Sorry, trombone slide for Simeon.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't really spent a lot of time practicing much else than that particular pattern. It's the only thing I could play on the bass guitar. So if anyone needs like a son clave pattern, Afro-Cuban, it's roots and fifth, I can hold that down.
Can they find you? Is there an email address? So can somebody email in?
It is pretty much. I mean, I did, have started playing other things, but I just put it down it'll be like months before I remember to pick it up again.
Pick it up again, and then you carry on. That's the way it goes.
It is. It's kind of I put it there to kind of remind me that it's there. It's like, yeah, I should.
Remember me? Remember how you put me here so you'd look at me every day and play me more? That's it. That's how it works. That's how the musical instruments work. Is that you put them in places that you can easily touch them,
Yeah,
and that's how you pick them up. And I feel that's quite a challenge. So sorry, just guiding us back onto the rails of tap dance. Let's say that's the challenge for me. Is like, okay, I've got to book a place to go because I got neighbours. I can't practice. At least where I live now, I can't practice. There's people underneath me. There's people above me. I think that's probably true for most people. Let's face it. If you're a tap dancer, you're living in an apartment. You ain't living in some 6-story house. You don't earn enough. Let's be honest.
honestly, I remember the days of so much frustration of like, where can I go and practice? Where can I go and tap? And I think one of the ways that I dealt with that was actually playing instruments, and finding other ways that would feed into the tap, so that it was because I think it just needed somewhere to be able to express those rhythms, and found that sometimes I'd spend hours at the piano. Sometimes when I was a student, I was a music student, I got well known because they had the music studios which we could book and use for free as a student, and I became well known amongst the like security staff as the person walking around with this big board.
Don't mind me, and there's just a plank of wood going through the corridor. Just two little feet at the bottom of it. That's it.
Pizza by Miso, and it's in this blue bag. I'll be like coming into the university, and
It's 10 o'clock at night. Why are you here?
and you know, it was a great way for me to be able to get in the studio, because soundproof studios,
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh,
and just be able to kind of like work out. So that was quite an important part of just be able to put your shoes on.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, I agree. I think
well,
that's a huge point you just make. I'm sorry to cut you off. You keep making all these great points, and I'm like, stop skirting over this. People have no idea. I think it's so important, and if you're coming up, if you're like going to be the next, this, that, or the other, to touch the vocabulary daily, or at least as much as you can. And I think that's a really good point. You just it's about finding planks of wood and just finding a space, even if that's not a dance studio, it's just a recording room, whatever, a room where that is your woodshed, right? A room where you will not be disturbed and you won't disturb other people, because that's what I realized early on, is that people will shout at you for making so much noise because they think you're being inconsiderate, and it's not that. You're just like, no, I was just trying to practice, and it's hard. Finding that space is hard, but that's super important. The like biggest piece of advice anyone ever gave me, I think, was just like, yeah, just put your shoes on every day. It's not supposed to be something special in that moment. It's not supposed to be like all the fireworks and all of your best stuff. No, just put them on every day and just go and just do something. And even if it sucks, even if it feels terrible, that's okay. At least you did it rather than not doing it, right? So I gotta ask you the next question here. Sorry, I'm reading from my laptop, so I don't, get sidetracked. Where are you at now with the art form?
That's a really good question, because I am currently doing a PhD in performing arts, uncovering the work of the forgotten African American choreographer Buddy Bradley. And it turns out, I only really stumbled on him maybe a couple of years ago, when we were in kind of lockdown mode, and I was kind of like seeing what else is out there. I started thinking again about my journey in tap in the UK, and the position of the syllabus and how difficult it was to find rhythm tap and to connect to the historical context of the dance. And I was like, okay, I knew about Will Gaines. Who else was there, and what was happening, before Will was here? Buddy Bradley's name popped up really quite by chance. Maybe not by chance because I was looking for tap, but it was a name that came up that I didn't recognize. And I kind of any name that was related to tap dance, I just jotted it down and thought I'll come back to it and Google that name. And when I looked at his very limited biographies there on Google, I was like, this guy was a dance director and choreographer of West End shows from the 1930s, and I'd never heard of him. And then I started digging a little bit deeper. This guy was Henry Latang's teacher.
I didn't know that. Can you tell? I know I've heard of Buddy Bradley, by the way. Can you tell us everything you know in a short space of time? Because we're in a short space of time. Who Buddy Bradley is? Well, he was a tap dancer and choreographer.
He was a dancer. He was a dance choreographer or dance director. They had lots of terms back in the day before choreographer, I think, was a term that was used maybe from the 50s.
And he was British?
He was American. He was African American. He was born in the early 1900s, and he ended up in New York. Basically, he ended up in New York, smack bang in the middle of the Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
As a teenager, and it turned out that he was good at dancing, and he picked up some steps. He practiced. He was influenced by all the other dancers and the acts around him, particularly, I think, Eddie Rector, was one of his biggest influences. And he got into the chorus of the shows that there were in New York, and he started doing really well. In fact, I think he was in a Florence Mills show. Anyway, it turns out that he, as talented and as good as he was, he realized that he'd rather create dances because he would get bored of doing the same thing over and over. So he wanted to create dances. So he teamed up with a black entrepreneur who could see the market. There's a gap in the market for the white performers in Broadway learning the black dances, because this is a time when Charleston and the Black Bottom and all of those kind of dances are suddenly becoming very popular. And there was a demand for them in the white Broadway shows. So Buddy Bradley teamed up with Billy Pierce, and they kind of opened up these dance studio dance classes in New York in the late 1920s. And he hit, I think, he became really popular in a very short space of time because he was good. And he started being invited to re-choreograph and restage some of the productions, the shows that were happening in Broadway. But because of all the racial segregation, he didn't get the public acknowledgement. He didn't get the credits. So
There was sidelining. There was
but he was so well known in the business that it turns out that Britain was sending scouts to America to see what was going on. And some of the big kind of production people like C.B. Cochran basically brought Buddy Bradley with Billy Pierce over to London in 1930 to stage a new show that he was doing. It was going open new theatre, really refurbished theatre in the West End. And it was a hit. It was a success. So Buddy ended up staying in the UK and basically working on many, many productions. What happened was that I managed to find some examples of his work, because he also worked in British musical film. I think he was basically the first black choreographer in Britain of film.
Man, Buddy Bradley's a hero. I had no idea. I'm proud of my history. I know it, but geez, all right.
This is exactly what happened. I think I typed his name in and something came up about him being a black choreographer of British musical film. And I'm like, what? No way. And again, I was like, I was pretty proud of mine.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think I suck from like 1930s onwards. I'm okay. Anything before that, I'm like, it's off the radar. I have no idea.
I think one of the things that you realize is that the more you kind of uncover, the more you realize you don't know, because there are so many parallels of people's stories that overlap. You know, I'm going over now, tracing through some of Buddy Bradley's work, and I went to the States to Tap City and was able to meet some of the masters. Like I had a conversation with Jenny Lagon. You know, I had conversations with Mabel Lee. I met Fayard Nicholas.
Crazy.
Turns out that all of them worked with Buddy Bradley when they came to the UK.
Of course they did. Yeah, he was the man.
He was the man. He was. And so yeah. So basically, I'm really fortunate to have been given a full studentship to research, you know, his work. Yeah, it's quite exciting because I actually never imagined that I was going to do a PhD in tap. I kind of thought this is a nice idea, but
I mean, it sounds to me like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like this could potentially be a dance book one day.
Well, there's so many things in this. I mean, there's a book in it. There's exhibitions. I was doing the talks before I even thought about applying for funding for the research, because what happened is that with so much piecemeal little bits of information about him, I didn't think I'd have much to work with. But when I ended up putting together a presentation for the Tap Dance Research Network, and my initial thought was I'm not going to have enough material on him, and it turned out I had too much material to do one talk. And then after the presentation, I think it was Jess Murray, who said, you know, you kind of got a PhD project in there. Yeah. And I was like, don't be daft.
And look at you now.
It wasn't on my mind. It wasn't something. But then the circumstances that we'd been in with work being really slow because of the lockdown and the pandemic, the fact that I was like, I'm going to have to find something to kind of focus on. There's lots of other things that were part of that decision. I did, for the entire time I was tap dancing from like the 2000s, I was self-funded because I worked as a web developer, and I'd been working part-time since about maybe 2007, 2008, but I was able to kind of like alternate between doing gigs and doing kind of web development projects.
As you casually do. You can casually code on the background, you know what I mean?
But I decided for...
Never having you on again.
Well, I decided to retire from web development. I decided that I was done with like marketing and web development work, and that I was just going to focus on being a creative.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is who I am. Yeah. And so that meant that freeing out that time, and also I had to find an income.
There is that, yeah.
That's a small detail. That work does actually pay quite well.
Yes, I'm used to being able to afford things. I guess that's gone. And is it the old tap? It's the old tap shoes coming out again.
So I had, it was, and all of that decision was before the pandemic. Those are decisions that I had made in 2000. I left it was a part-time job, but it kind of kept me going. I left that job in 2019 and decided 2020 is the year.
You've had plenty of time to get creative. There's just been zero work in that field. Well, that's rotten luck. We're laughing about it. It's amazing that you're able to laugh about it, but that is fill in the expletive, you know.
It was. I honestly was like, what the hell? Because I didn't have many gigs kind of lined up in 2020, but all the ones that were evaporated. All the potential for work evaporated, and all the potential. I started thinking about I need to get some funding so that I can get my projects. All of that disappeared. I was on the plane to Malta to do a conference with the Tap Dance Research Network on tap dancing when the pandemic was announced. I landed in Malta, was like, we have to have an emergency meeting. It was at the University of Malta. I turned up with my bag, and basically, like, the conference was cancelled and was sent home because of the pandemic. So I was, it was, yeah. that was
straight back on the plane.
less than 24 hours in Malta, but you know, it was all my plans for TAP. I had potentially a gig. My first gig with my own band was being lined up at a jazz club.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be like later that summer. All of this stuff just disappeared. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Because it was all my income streams. I obviously had a look and see, what if I did go back and do like kind of web development work? But because I'd had a kind of permanent part-time job, they had provided all the hardware and software that I would need, and all of my stuff was out of date. Because now everything was like, you needed to be on the cloud, you needed to have the latest that and the other, and I had no money. So
Exactly. I got a pair of tap shoes. How's that?
I was like, and I was like, I'm not going to spend all of those kind of thousands of pounds just for the odd kind of web development gig here and there, because I would have to invest in everything's like cloud subscriptions. You'd have to pay like every month, and I was like, that's not what I'm focusing on here. So I thought, no, I'm going to stick to my plan. I just hadn't figured out how that was going to materialize because all the options had changed. But I think I was also very fortunate because I'd had kind of in some ways built myself a reputation, and some of the creative work came knocking on my door. So I ended up teaming up with a Lindy Hop company, Swing Sister Swing, who were looking for another workshop facilitator for a Lindy Hop jazz project that they had with live music. And although it wasn't tap per se, it was completely in the right field of what it is that I wanted to do. And I basically landed my first job as like a music director.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. That's amazing, and I wish you all the success continuing to do that. I have a really tough question for you. Okay, it's tap related. It's tap related.
Oh no.
But I just kind of like racking my head, like, who can handle this question?
Oh no.
I'm sure it's Annette. So I'm just throwing it out there, and like, feel free to not answer this. And this is actually about tap itself rather than about you, but I'm interested in what your opinion is. Okay, again, this is an open question, and this is something personally I go back and forth with, and one of the ones I kind of go back and forth with the most. Do you believe that we need more acceptance and empathy when it comes to tap? Or does this art form need people who are going to draw a line in the sand and say, we are the elite and this is authentic?
There's a question.
Right?
You know what? I've been thinking on the different mechanisms on how kind of tap came about, became popular, fell out of kind of the popular limelight, but kind of stayed there underground with the masters and whatnot. And I think one of the difficult things that we have in navigating a tap is that it's kind of, we're part of the wider market of, you know, social and cultural changes that are happening. And I don't think you can isolate like one single thing that needs to occur for us to be like moving forward. So I think it's important that we do have people who are really passionate about tap dancing and what it stands for. But I think it's also not helpful if they are able to kind of like prevent their creativity and change of what tap dancing is actually about. You know, it's an art form that came out of oppression and suppression. It's a subversive art form, and the creativity of an expression it means that it's constantly changing and shifting, so you can't like box it in. And what I found, one of the things that has come up in my PhD is that I'm now kind of toying with this ideology around the Africanist aesthetic, which is a kind of a term used to identify certain types of art. It can be kind of sculpture, art, dance. It's applied to dance. And there are kind of dances from the African diaspora that you can identify. And one of the things that I find in dances of the African diaspora is that they're constantly evolving. There is, I think, a lot of weight and significance to recognizing where you come from, like having that roots. But also there is a danger of letting it get in the way of creative expression and moving forward. So in answer to your question, we need both.
Amazing answer. Take notes, people. Take notes.
It keeps the dialogue alive. You know, it's once you stop having a conversation and a dialogue, that's when things are dead.
100%. 100%. I agree. I think as soon as we say this is definitely what it is, without losing touch with the roots, as soon as we say it's definitely this or definitely not that, it's then limiting the artistic scope by which you might be able to express yourself. And like, so I think, this probably just to further your point, I think reaching for something, even if it falls short of sort of quote unquote authenticity, has value. And even if it's just that you realize that's the wrong direction, right? For that particular artist, it has value to go, oh, well, actually, do you know what? That worked for some reasons. It worked for different, it didn't work for other reasons.
I think that sometimes what happens is, and what you could see in any art form that becomes popular, if you like, or kind of like a commercial success, is that there are going to be people and companies who want to exploit that kind of element without having any interest whatsoever in the authenticity of the form, and that's what I think we tend to be like kind of trying to work against. But those people are kind of like going to come and go, and there's always going to be those people lined up ready to jump on the bandwagon. They've always been there. They're not going anywhere.
Absolutely. I think there's a flash in the pan scenario that really, when I see things that can make me go, ugh, you know, I'm always sort of like, well, in a way it's kind of okay, because first of all, you may as well not be wearing tap shoes. Second of all, I don't think that what they're doing occupies the same space as at least what I try to do. as a tap, what yourself probably tries to do as well, which is just to stay as authentic as I can, versus like obviously keeping relevant. But I just look at it and go, these shaking your ass. All right, it doesn't really come into the history of tap very much when you look at Hoofers. They weren't really doing that too much. But it's kind of okay in the sense that this is not the same gig. Do you know what I mean? That is what it is. Like, that's just a separate thing now. You happen to be wearing tap shoes, okay. You may as well take them off for the same net result. But then, yeah, you also don't want to be a dinosaur and be like, oh, you kids don't know what this art form's about. So, just to your point, that's the perfect response, saying that it's a dialogue, you know, and I think that the landscape of artistic differences should be the very thing that kind of draws us into that dialogue rather than sort of tearing us apart, right? Yeah. Okay, Annette, I have 10 quick-fire questions, which I asked to all of my guests, and these
are the things that I really can't do.
I know, I've noticed. I'm making you as uncomfortable as possible. So I call it Inside the Tap Dancer Studio, and I've kind of stolen that from James Lipton and the Actors Studio. But these are complete nonsense questions. Just make of them what you will. You could just quick fire, whoever, whatever. There's no wrong answer here. There's just like, you know, I like to give my listeners a little bit more of an insight into what is your knee-jerk reaction.
Okay. Okay, we'll try. I'll try. I might just freeze.
Right, before we go on, oh, I've lost connection. Annette, what is your favourite song?
Oh, gosh. Do you know, at the moment, I tend to really overplay Herbie Hancock's Chameleon.
Fantastic. Love that song. Fantastic response. Who is your favourite tap dancer?
Ooh. At the moment, because it changes, is Jimmy Slide.
Okay, fantastic response again. This is going to be a tough one for you as well. What is your favourite instrument?
Oh, come on!
No, you're juggling.
My tap shoes! My tap shoes!
Okay, great response. What do you like about yourself the most?
That I'm optimistic.
Yeah, good response. What do you wish was different about you?
I wasn't so damn detailed.
I thought you were just going to say nothing. What is your favourite sound?
My favourite what, sorry?
What is your favourite sound?
Sound? Water.
What is your least favourite sound?
Oh, you know what? After this morning, pneumatic drills.
We can add in parentheses recently to that question.
I could hear it. No.
Do you think music first or dancing first?
Music.
I had a sneaky suspicion you were going to say that. Now, this is a really stupid question, and I kind of throw it in there for fun, and it's a two-part, so it's 9 and 10.
Okay.
If heaven is real and you get there, once again, stupid question, who do you talk to first, a tap dancer or otherwise, and what do you ask them? Okay. Because what you ask them might depict, like, who you want to talk to first, right?
Oh. Do you know what? Very randomly, I'd actually talk to my great-grandmother on my mum's side, because I never met her, but she wrote me a letter. And I guess I'd just ask her what life was like in Jamaica.
Saucy question. A very saucy response. Yeah, I dig that. That's amazing. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Annette, thank you so much for talking with me. I feel like I learned a whole bunch. I'm going to have to go back and just listen to this a whole bunch over because you said so much interesting stuff there.
Thank you so much, Simeon.
I just want to say, keep doing your thing. Keep going on your path because you are such a force for good in this world, not only in the creative world, but in the world of human beings in general. So not just involved in the arts, but also on the planet. And this has just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
That's it, we're good, we're off. For full content and classes, subscribe to patreon.com/thetapdanceteacher.